right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone across the globe that's joining us today. This is Stephanie from Acquia. We're really excited to kick off this webinar today with our friends at Bounteous. It's titled How Bounteous Built and Launched a Website in 10 Days with Acquia Site Studio, and we have lots of fun content to share with you. So we're thrilled you're here. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. If you have any audio issues, please send them in the Q&A tab and I will assist you. If you have any questions for the presenters, please also submit them in the Q&A tab and they will answer them towards the end of the presentation. Slides and the recording of this webinar will be posted to acquia.com and also sent to you via email within the next few days. Without further delay, I'll pass it over to Chris.
Thank you, Stephanie. Welcome. My name is Chris Greetens. I'm Vice President of Drupal Engineering at Bounteous, and I've been working in Drupal and at Bounteous for over 10 years now. And I have several certifications, including being a Site Studio certified site builder.
My name is Mark Ahrens. I'm a technical account manager here at Acquia, and I help assist customers with strategic goals and making sure that Drupal and Acquia products work well for them as they build out their sites and customer journeys. So before we dive into the story that Chris has for today, I just wanted to talk a little bit about Site Studio in general. And what it is. So it is an Acquia product that allows you to build a Drupal experience using a low-code tool, which allows you to build both a style guide and a full theme and a content editing experience that is heads and tails above the normal Drupal experience. And so you can define your branding, you can create reusable templates and components, leveraging a lot of the same strategies that you may be using in design tools like Figma and Sketch. And in addition, all of this is being done through the Drupal interface, through an intuitive drag and drop site builder. So you can create the components through the UI, you define your fonts and colors all through the UI, and it really allows a front-end developer to get up to speed and build a site in Drupal without having to have a local environment and code base set up. And then for the content editing experience, the content editors have an intuitive tool that allows you to drag and drop and reorder components and change what they need to build really engaging experiences without having to do a bunch of extra work or learn a whole kind of complex suite of tools within the Drupal experience. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Chris.
All right, thanks, Mark. At Bounteous, we create big picture digital solutions that help leading companies deliver transformational brand experiences. And, we've been a partner and actually an Acquia preferred partner. I've been partnering with Acquia for over 10 years now. And, one of the reasons we love working with Acquia is because of stories like this. So what I want to talk to you about today is how we at Bounteous took a challenging internal request and made it happen. But before we dive into the specifics of that challenge, I want to talk a little bit about how we got to start using Site Studio in the first place. So earlier this year, Acquia invited us to participate in the early adopter program for Acquia Site Studio. And while Site Studio, which is formerly known as Cohesion, had been around for a while, we at Bounteous hadn't yet used it. And Site Studio and other tools like it really intrigue us because we've long been proponents of building platforms for our clients using component-based architectures. So instead of focusing on building individual pages, we focus on building components and layouts that can be used to build those pages in a flexible manner. This approach gives marketers freedom to deliver the message they want to deliver and how they want to deliver it. So being part of the early adopter program gave us a chance to build some small sites using Site Studio. And this allowed us to compare it to the other tools and techniques that we use to build component-based platforms. We had a few developers spend a few weeks using Site Studio, and after building some components and templates and pages, We liked it enough and we felt comfortable enough so that we could recommend it to some of our clients to use with their projects. So after we went through the early adopter program, we became a certified partner. And so the next step was really to find those greenfield projects that could benefit from using Site Studio. And we had 2 upcoming client builds that we felt were a really good match for Site Studio. One of the reasons we felt they were both a good match for Site Studio was really the modern admin experience that Mark was referring to. When I think of a modern admin experience, I think there are a few key takeaways. One is a drag and drop interface, and Site Studio provides one. And this makes it easy to build and edit content. It also makes it easy for developers to build new components and layouts. In addition to the drag and drop experience, the ability to provide smart default layouts for each content type with the ability to customize specific nodes is also important. For example, if you have a content type that has hundreds, if not thousands of nodes, you generally want those pages to be built with the same template. But you also want to be able to tweak the template for some specific nodes to, again, deliver the right message at the right time. The ability to tweak the site theme using the UI and without a code deployment is also key. For content editors, you can provide custom styles that can be selected or a color palette that's limited to your brand guidelines. And this makes it easy to get a great looking component, but one that also stays within your brand guidelines. Site Studio UI Kit provides dozens of components that met the XD requirements for these projects. Creating your own components with Site Studio is really easy, but you also have the option of starting with the Site Studio UI Kit components and then theming those components. Depending on your requirements, this can make your build much faster. Both clients had an eye toward personalization in the near future. So the fact that Site Studio integrated well with Acquia personalization was also important to us. So once the builds began, our developers were really impressed with how quickly we were able to make and demonstrate progress to the stakeholders. So then came the Slack message. Hey, Chris, do you have a minute? And the message came from John, our VP of marketing. And John is the main stakeholder for all of our websites. So I hopped on a Slack call with John and he quickly explained the request. Keith Schwartz, who's our CEO, was going to be giving a webinar in about a week and a half about how we use co-innovation to drive results for our customers. And in addition to that webinar, he also had written a co-innovation manifesto. So he had lots of content that we wanted to share with folks. And so what John really wanted was for us to launch a website before the webinar. And we felt that this would give us a great place to point attendees, the attendees of the webinar, and then a place where we could share that great information with everyone afterwards. So the initial ask was really a one-page website, but we planned on adding content and expanding on that message. So the site would really need to expand and grow over time. So John asked me, what do you think? Well, what do I think? Yeah, yikes, that's a tight deadline. And in order to meet that deadline, everything was going to need to be super crisp. And frankly, we were going to need to find a way to supercharge the project. So in order to meet the timeline, we definitely needed some help. So we wanted to find a tool that could help us. And that tool would need to have a few characteristics. Ideally, it would already provide some pre-built components and modules to make the build more efficient. And collaboration between development and design in projects like this is necessary and vital. So it must make it easy to collaborate with the experienced design team. It needed to allow changes to be made and tested rapidly and often in collaboration with an XD expert. It also needed to be a tool that we are familiar with, so we didn't spend a lot of time learning how to use that tool. In addition to these kind of current requirements, there were also some future requirements to consider as well. We wanted it to be built on a CMS so that content could be created and modified by non-developers and not need a developer or a release to update the site. We also wanted the marketing team to be empowered. So we wanted the tool to allow non-developers to be able to tweak the theming as necessary, and again, without needing a release. And finally, we wanted a solution that fits with a personalization tool that we already use. So our website, Bounteous.com, is built with Drupal and is hosted on the Acquia platform. So we knew we wanted to build a new site with Drupal and host it at Acquia. And having chosen Acquia and Drupal, we had one more decision. How do we build a component-based approach? We could use Layout Builder that comes with core Drupal, along with the component library that we've built up over the years. or we could use a tool like Acquia Site Studio. And given the requirements, Acquia Site Studio checked all the boxes. So from a developer's perspective, we had our approach, but before committing, we needed to talk to our XD experts. So when preparing for a build, it's really important to choose the right tool for the job. Part of being the right tool for the job is making sure that the designer's vision can be achieved using that tool. To supercharge the build, we felt it was important to use the Site Studio UI kit. It provided dozens of pre-built components that really only needed to be themed to meet our brand standards. During our meeting with the designers to design the initial, or to discuss the initial design ideas, we were able to demo these components, and we quickly were able to align on the components that we would use. The components' versatility allowed us to keep structure and functional changes to a minimum. Having the ability to rapidly prototype the designs and collaborate on them was also key. Again, Site Studio UI Kit was a big help here. It provides template files using the sketch file format, and Sketch is a tool that our designers use and are familiar with. And while we didn't end up using it, the ability to create a style guide using Site Studio was also a consideration. So after meeting with our XD team, it was confirmed we would use Drupal and Site Studio plus the UI kit. And so having decided on Acquia, Drupal, and Site Studio, it was really time for action, and there was no time to waste. With the tool selection in place, it was time for the real work to begin. And as the designers began to pull together a vision to bring that co-innovation idea to life, the developer began working on the platform. First on the list was getting a skeleton Drupal site spun up. And this was easy to do in our Acquia Site Factory instance. After we spun up the site on Site Factory, we did kind of the usual things you do with a Drupal build. We installed core and contrib modules, and then we configured Drupal to meet our preferences and requirements. Then we also installed and configured Site Studio, and then we imported the Site Studio UI kit. Really, in practically no time at all, the prep work was complete. And while the developer was getting the environment prepped, the designer started designing the site and creating the vision. With the tight deadline, it was important to know that what was designed was easy to implement. This was one of the reasons why we chose Site Studio. By having those downloadable sketch files, our designer was able to create designs that we had confidence would easily translate into the tool. And by being able to demo the components, our designer was able to understand exactly how the components would work. There was really no guesswork involved. So with prep work in place and the design in hand, it was really time to build. And with our tight deadline, it was important to be able to show progress and receive timely feedback. And two concepts that helped us here were really important. One, we were able to commit code and have routine deployments to a shared environment. Whenever we finished with some styling or building new components within Site Studio, we were able to export the Site Studio configuration, commit the configuration to Git, and then have those changes automatically pushed up to a shared environment. And having an easy to deploy setup allowed our stakeholders to see the progress and provide feedback as we went along. And second, using Site Studio made it easy for the developer and designer to collaborate in real time. Having a screen sharing session where tweaks could be made and tested out quickly saved a lot of back and forth that usually happens in Jira tickets. And once the updates were made, it was easy to push those changes up to the shared environment for stakeholder approval. A tight deadline means everything needs to go smoothly, and in this project it did. Whenever you're working on a project, you really need to be thinking about the budget, time, scope triangle. You can fix two of these factors, but not all three. In this case, our timeline was fixed, right? We wanted to make sure that this site was built and launched before the webinar. And the budget was really not movable either. With a timeline so short, spending more money really couldn't affect anything to shorten the timeline up. So what this meant was scope was our only lever. And the team really understood that scope needed to be flexible, and they worked together whenever a potential issue arose to modify the plans as needed to keep the project scope within the timeline. Using Site Studio and the UI kit really helped us accelerate the development here. The pre-built components that I mentioned a number of times were really a big boost to our velocity. But just as importantly, we were able to collaborate in real time and see those results instantaneously. By being able to work within Drupal, we were able to avoid unnecessary builds and deployments, which really sped the delivery process. For the project, we were able to avoid any custom coding as well. So Drupal and Site Studio were able to accomplish everything we needed without the need for custom modules. So, every project is measured, and in the end, we want to know, really, was the project successful or not? This project, I think, was a success. First and foremost, the site was launched on time. And, for this project, this was really the only metric that mattered. The site needed to be launched in 10 days, and it was. Marketing and the experience design team were happy with the results. So John, the main stakeholder, the VP of marketing, I talked to him afterwards, and he was really happy with the site. It certainly met those expectations, and we're both confident it'll meet the future expectations and requirements as well. Our designers were also happy with the site. And this is really important to me. Did we execute the designer's vision to their satisfaction? And yes, we did. The developer was well rested. So, we all know when you get a project like this, you really need to be prepared for long nights and weekends. Well, I guess in this case, probably just one weekend. But I'm really happy to say the developer on the project did all this development work on a normal schedule, and there were no weekends involved. He got all of his sleep. Everything was great. The platform serves the current needs, but it's also ready for future requirements as well. So whenever you build a platform, it's really important to be thinking about future requirements. You want the platform that you build to be extensible and adaptable to handle those future requirements. In this case, we felt the platform is really well prepared for the future. Marketers need to have great flexibility, and already since the launch, the marketing team has been able to make small tweaks to the content and the design without involving developers or really needing a production deployment. This site we know is going to move from a single page site to multiple pages. And the current vision, to expand this site as we introduce more and more content, really lends itself to the Site Studio tool. Site Studio is going to make it easy for our marketing team to create new layouts that fit that new content. And, like adding a menu to the header in the master template is going to be easy with some of the pre-built components that come with Site Studio. We know this tool is all ready for personalization. We use a variety of different personalization tools at Bounteous, and one that we really like is Acquia personalization. And we know that when we are ready to do personalization on the co-innovation site, these tools will work together nicely. And finally, it can create a style guide. Though we didn't create a style guide for the initial launch, Site Studio does provide us the ability to create one if we decide to do so in the future. So when I think about this project, what are some of the key takeaways, and what are some of the key principles it follows? Platform principle number one is build reusable components and layouts to give marketers maximum flexibility. Component-based approaches with Drupal are really nothing new, and at Bounteous, we've been taking this approach for many years. By giving the content creators a variety of templates and components to build content, they have the freedom to build what they want and what they need. And Site Studio is a fantastic way to take this approach. The Site Studio UI is both easy to use and powerful. Content editors will appreciate this approach to building out content. Platform principle number two, reduce friction for the marketers to increase speed to market. It is important that the content creators can build the content they need when they need it. Without a properly built system, content creators can find themselves dependent on developers to build new functionality and to shepherd it through the development process. This all takes time and introduces friction into the content creation process. Site Studio helps here as well. As mentioned before, the UI makes it easy for content creators to create content, but it goes beyond that as well. With Site Studio, new components and layouts can be built without a production deployment. Updates to the site's theme can also happen without a production deployment. If the creators have some knowledge of Site Studio and CSS, this can be done all without developers. Platform principle number three, have a common system where designers and developers can work together. It's important that developers and designers work together to bring that design vision to life. It's also important that the developers and designers are speaking the same language. A key to this is having a common system where developers and designers can work together. With building a new site, I think about how it can be built to follow Brad Frost's atomic design principles. How do we build the site in a way to incorporate atoms and molecules, organisms, templates, and pages? Site Studio is built in a way to support the atomic design principles. You can easily combine multiple atoms like an input box, a label, and a button to create a search box component. In Brad Frost's terms, this would be a molecule. Then combine that search box component with a menu component and an image component to create a header component. In Brad Frost's terms, this would be an organism. And then combine multiple components together to create a template. The way Site Studio works lends itself naturally to the atomic design principles.
So Chris, that all sounds great, but what about developers? So are there any concerns from a kind of a developer perspective?
Well, as a developer, and I've been developing for, I don't know, 25 or so years, I too have been a little bit unsure about this low code tools, and things like Site Studio. But, after having worked with Site Studio for a while, I think it really benefits developers too. If it helps you really follow good principles for developing a platform, by using Site Studio, it really makes it easier to build a component-based platform. And if you build a component-based platform, it will empower the marketers to take care of the trivial tasks that they depend on you for. No longer will you be needed to help build content or rearrange components on a page or tweak the spacing in the header. You're using Site Studio, all these become the domain of the content creators, not you, the developers. But let's be real, right? There are going to be times where new components going to be needed, and a developer is going to need to build it. Here too, I think Site Studio helps by making it easier and faster to create these components. Build once, use everywhere. So if you are a developer that's in charge of multiple sites and those sites use Site Studio, you can easily export the components and templates you've already created on one site and then use them in all your other sites. All this should mean really that you have less simple manual tasks to do, leaving you time to work on the more complicated and interesting and really business results driven work. So, one thing I will note though is that Site Studio is really a front end developer tool. And any CSS that you create, you'll use a UI to build rather than code. So this is something that's taken me a little bit of time to get used to. But what I think it also means is that building a site from scratch is still really the domain of the developer. Once the site has been built, non-developers can tweak the CSS, but I really think that the foundation built in Site Studio is probably best left to a developer.
That's great to hear the developers are still going to be necessary, still going to be busy with building out the projects and that sort of thing. So it seems like Site Studio is a pretty powerful tool. With everything that it does, what does Drupal do then still?
Well, I mean, Drupal is still really at the core of Site Studio. So, it really works in concert with Drupal to make Drupal even more powerful. Site Studio is really functionality that we add on to Drupal. So, it works to enhance Drupal just like any other core or contrib module. So when you're building a site with Site Studio, you can still take advantage of the Drupal contrib ecosystem, and core modules like views are still available to you. What's really interesting to me is that you can have structured content, which we do a lot of, and have that really next to unstructured content and use the appropriate tool for the specific use case. So how I view it, it's really more of a replacement for something like Layout Builder and your custom theme, obviously as opposed to replacing Drupal. And when you use Site Studio, Drupal is still really at the core of what you're doing.
Well, Chris, that sounds fantastic. I mean, it's really impressive the project getting completed on time, the developer not being extremely stressed out about it. It sounds like the tool worked in concert with the developer experience and the user experience team as well. Kind of all came together really nicely to have you guys accomplish something pretty impressive in such a short timeline. So I think it's a really, really cool story and really impressed with what the team has done there. one of the things that I wanted to touch on real quick was one of the things that you've alluded to throughout the presentation was the style guide feature is part of Site Studio. So as part of my job, we work with a number of different uh, partners and companies to leverage Site Studio in a number of different ways. And one of them was building out a true platform of sites. And by the requirement was that all of the sites had to use the same components. So whether it's a collection of cards or that type of thing, and then also have the ability to make the sites have some distinct look and feel changes to them. And so one of the things that Site Studio allows you to do is leverage the style guide feature, which exposes some of the elements of the theme itself. So things like fonts and colors, where you don't have to be a developer to go and make those changes. It's all through kind of the theme settings area where you could go in and say, instead of the green header, we're going to do a purple header instead. And the front end developer can define some requirements around them as well. So you can say, you can't just pick any color to be your header. You can choose one of the 3 different brand colors. And really what was really cool about that is that the partner was able to build a true platform that gave the flexibility to make those changes without having to do code deploys, without having to make dramatic changes, without having to use a lot of the developer time to build that stuff out that the front end team was going to be able to want to change on a per site basis. And it also gets to one of the things that Chris was talking about with developers, where the development team was then able to do a little custom development that the developers would have been taking time to build out the theme and make the changes and do a whole bunch of code deploys and that sort of stuff. By taking the time to moving that time away from the developer and giving it to the front end team or the site ownership team, the development team was able to build a truly custom experience with mapping and different settings that really differentiated those collection of sites, while the front end experience is all handled by the front end team. So the tool itself can do a whole bunch of interesting things, but what Chris alluded to at the end there as well is Drupal's still at the core of all of this. So custom modules, contrib modules, they all still play well with Site Studio and can really Site Studio really extends Drupal to be a truly powerful tool that gives the front end developers the experience that they want in ease of use without having to build a whole local environment and learn a whole bunch of technical stuff. But really, it gives the content editors that experience to build out those truly engaging experiences on their site as well. So I think we have time for some questions then.
Yeah, we've got a couple that have come in, Mark, and I'll ask, and then we can figure out who wants to answer.
That sounds great.
One of them was, in order to use Site Studio, do you need to get trained on the Drupal platform?
So my opinion would be that it's still important to know some level of Drupal. So because the Site Studio is kind of it includes a module component that goes on top of Drupal, having somebody who's going to still be able to kind of do the care and feeding of Drupal with module updates and core updates, making sure the code base is secure and up to date is still going to be an important part of the process. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I totally agree. And again, like there's a whole world of contrib modules. So if you need to integrate with Salesforce, there's a module for that. If you need to have breadcrumbs on your site, there's a module for that. There's so many modules that are out there in the Drupal community that can really extend the functionality on your website, that someone kind of needs to know that. I think where this really helps you out, Site Studio, is you don't necessarily need to know how to do the theming. So your developers don't really need to know how to do Twig, and you don't really need to know how to build a theme, from scratch, or based off a different theme. So there is some knowledge that you need to have, but it really kind of reduces the knowledge you need in certain parts of Drupal. And then another question we got, Mark, was Site Studio is it just for web site development, or can you use it to develop apps as well?
So the tool itself is going to be for building websites by itself. However, you can, because of the way that it can work in concert with things like Sketch and that sort of stuff, the components that are designed through a tool like that can be built out into Site Studio for your website, but then you can still use that same design language in your app as well. And so it's, while the tool is for building out websites, it works in concert with those design and user experience tools, so you're not having to reinvent the wheel entirely for things like the building out an app interface and that type of thing.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. What about when upgrading the Drupal version of the site, as an example, from D8 to D9? What's involved, or how is Site Studio version impacted?
Yeah, so in general, it's going to be similar to a normal contrib module. So at its core, Site Studio is still kind of a Drupal module and Drupal experience. So the Site Studio team within Acquia makes sure that they're aware of Drupal 8 to Drupal 9 upgrades, and making sure that the module is going to work across the upgrade process. And so it's going to be similar to a normal contrib module in that respect, but the team has definitely got their finger on the Drupal community as well, and are familiar with the upgrade process. So as of right now, Site Studio, the module and service all do work with both Drupal 8 and Drupal 9.
Yeah, and we've used it in both places and haven't seen any issues yet. So we're pretty excited about it. That's all I see for questions for now. Any other thoughts, Mark? One just came in, I think. Curious as to whether you used Site Studio to configure the display of a view. I currently use Display Suite to display some of my views, but would prefer to use only one tool for site presentation. So on the single page site, we didn't have anything that we used views for, but views is really well integrated with the Site Studio. I think Mark probably could expand on that a lot more than I can, but they really put a lot of thought into that, into building the views out and using repeater patterns and things. I mean, I think it's a pretty sophisticated system, and I played around with it a little bit and been pretty happy with it. So I think it would certainly meet your needs. But Mark, I don't know what you think.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, by asking somewhat technical questions, you might get me in the weeds a little bit here. But the Site Studio actually has a couple different ways to handle that scenario. By default, you can, when you're with a content type, you can do a specific display like a teaser, and use Site Studio to lay that out and how you want to present that. And views can then just leverage that same display in the view results. It also has the concept of building out a template for the display of a view, where you're going to place the different fields and that sort of thing, all within the Site Studio interface. So with views, there's a couple different ways that you can incorporate Site Studio. It really depends on the specific scenario that you'd be doing, but it definitely does play well together.
I don't know. I don't see any more questions. Mark, do you have any other thoughts? I mean, what have you seen that have been, really good use cases that you've seen work well with Site Studio?
Yeah, so especially teams that have the concept of building out a brand manual or style guide or design language for their project, that's kind of where we've seen the fastest and kind of best return on investment. The tool really wants to kind of enforce that and leverage that wherever you have. So the idea of you've defined your brand colors. Well, then once you've got those defined and you build those into those, the tool exposes those in different spots where you want them to be leveraged. So you can, you want your to leverage a specific color from your brand manual. Well, instead of having to go and set that everywhere throughout the site, you define that color for your headings, and it gets applied everywhere, via CSS and kind of the behind the scenes. But then you can also expose it to the different variations on that. And all of that kind of ties together. And so you're still enforcing what comes from your style guide and your brand manual through the tool. And so that makes sure that while the content team has the ability to express the freedom that they want in how the content gets presented, it's still going to enforce all of the things that you want in your design language or your brand manual. And so it's kind of that ideal scenario where the content team has the flexibility to do what they want, but all within the parameters of making sure that things stay consistent and the look and feel is appropriate for the brand.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. I don't see any other questions. Oh, wait. It's unclear whether Site Studio can be used to add pages to an existing site versus used to start a site from scratch. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, so the tool can definitely be used in both scenarios. It is the most powerful, I would say, when you're starting from scratch, where you can build the tool in from the very beginning. But we've worked with a number of customers on the TAM side of things who they're incorporating Site Studio into an existing design. And the biggest thing there is that you're probably not going to leverage some of the theming options, because you're going to be implementing it straight into an existing theme. But the content editing experience for using the layout canvas and building out the components, that all can definitely get added to an existing site. And so we have one customer who they've got a whole bunch of structured content with news articles and that sort of stuff, but they are leveraging this for like a marketing page where they've built out a number of components that they can reorder and restructure and have that unstructured marketing page content live within an existing site. So they're still getting the advantage of using a Site Studio, but they're not using it for every single piece of the site.
Yeah, I totally agree. We've our experience has really been starting from scratch, but we definitely in our experience have determined that you can use it for existing sites, and so yeah, it really depends on use case.
I think we've officially answered all of the questions. So thank you guys both very much. I love that they kept coming in. We appreciate that. Everyone that's here joining. So again, a big thank you to our speakers, and thank you all again for attending and actively participating today. Obviously, we know during these trying times that you have a lot of places that you can be. So we're pleased that you could be here with us. As a reminder, the slides and the recording of this webinar will be posted to acquia.com and sent to you via email within the next few days. I think we had a few other questions regarding cost. We invite you to visit our website. Feel free to reach out to a member of our sales team, and we'll be more than happy to talk about cost. So the slides will be coming in the next few days, and any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to marketing@theacquiateam.com, and we'll get those answered right away, and both by Mark or Chris. Thank you again, and I hope you have a great day.